You're sitting there on the couch you know by heart, the one with the coffee stain shaped like a non-existent continent. And you realize something. No. You've spent the last 15 years becoming half the neighborhood's emotional ATM. Congratulations. You've won the Most Helpful Person of the Year award for 14 consecutive years. The statuette? It doesn't exist. Sincere gratitude? Not even that. But you have an impressive arsenal of "thanks anyways," said with the same conviction as someone thanking a speed camera. So here you are, with the revelation hitting you like a garbage truck at 6 in the morning. Maybe, just maybe, that little voice saying, "Think about yourself too," wasn't the tempting devil, but the only neuron that survived the massacre of your self-esteem. And now that you've decided to listen to it, a curious thing happens. The world doesn't end, but the people around you act as if you've just announced that from now on you'll only speak in medieval verse. If you've realized that your worth isn't measured in infinite availability, leave a like now, so I'll know you're no longer anyone's emotional ATM. The first time you say no without adding 17 justifications, a resume of your suffering, and a handwritten letter of apology, you hear a strange noise. It's the sound of your relationships cracking like a windshield hit by a rock. Your mother calls you in that tone, the one she learned from the advanced course in acting guilt, and asks if you're okay, with the underlying implication that you obviously aren't, because anyone in their right mind would have said yes to her request to spend every Sunday sorting out the family album since 1964. Your sister sends a message in your family group, "What's gotten into you?" followed by 3 thoughtful emojis and a thermometer-mouthed face, as if you're suffering from family betrayal fever. Your friend, the one who only calls you when he needs someone to listen to him, complain about his boss for 3 hours straight, suddenly stops responding to your messages. Disappeared. Vanished. As if you've contracted a contagious disease called personal boundaries. Here's the truth no one tells you. When you stop being the emotional mat on which everyone wipes their muddy shoes of existence, people react as if you've changed the rules of the game mid-game. And technically, that's true. Except you didn't even know you were playing. You thought it was love, connection, family. Instead, it was an unwritten contract where you provided unlimited support, and they gave you the privilege of feeling needed in return. The problem is that you've built your identity on foundations as fragile as a house of cards during a hurricane. Who are you without the role of savior? Without the function of walking emotional dumpster? Without the qualification of the person you can always count on, which really means the person who never matters? You don't know at first. You're there. In front of the bathroom mirror, the one with the light bulb flickering as if it were about to breathe its last, and you don't recognize the person looking back at you. Where have your desires gone? When was the last time you did something just because you felt like it, without wondering if it would disappoint someone? Do you remember that time you wanted to go to a concert, but you had to cancel because your cousin needed you to watch her kids? Or that vacation you canceled because your coworker gave you doe-eyed looks and said only you could fill his shoes? Or that class you never started because every time you thought about yourself, you felt a wave of guilt so strong you could have fueled a power plant? You've accumulated repressed desires like someone hoarding old magazines, convinced they might be useful someday. Spoiler alert. That day never came. And now that you've finally decided to open that cellar of your soul where you've stored everything you truly were, you discover that inside is an entire museum of yourself. Versions of yourself you've never known, abandoned hobbies, dreams put on hold, opinions you never expressed because someone might be offended. The first week after deciding to choose yourself is surreal. You wake up and don't immediately check your phone to see who needs something. You eat breakfast without feeling guilty for not having already solved 3 other people's problems. You leave the house and realize you can go wherever you want. Revolutionary concept, right? Doing what you want with your time. It's like discovering you can breathe underwater, or that pigeons are actually government drones. But then comes the storm. Guilt shows up at your door, like a particularly persistent door-to-door salesman. It doesn't knock gently. It breaks the lock and settles in on your couch, eating your chips and commenting on your every decision. You're selfish. It says, you abandoned the people who counted on you. What kind of person are you? And you, who have spent your entire life defining yourself by your usefulness to others, begin to believe that maybe it's right. This is the critical moment. The crossroads, where many turn back, convinced that that pain means they're doing something wrong. But here's the trick. That pain isn't your conscience telling you you're becoming a bad person. It's your psyche awakening from a decades-long coma. It's like when you sit in the same position for too long and your legs tingle when you move. It doesn't mean moving is wrong. It means blood is finally returning to areas that had been forgotten. The people around you, those who benefited from your limitless availability, intensify their attacks. They use the remember when strategy, listing every single time you were there for them, as if you'd incurred a debt to be repaid for eternity. After all I've done for you, they say, conveniently forgetting that you've done triple the work for them without ever sending a bill. You've changed, they add, in that disappointed tone, as if changing were the worst possible crime, rather than the only sensible thing to do when you realize you're living someone else's life. Some disappear completely. And this teaches you a brutal but necessary lesson. Many of your relationships weren't relationships. They were transactions. You provided emotional services, time, energy, unconditional support. They provided their presence, which you accepted as if it were a precious gift, rather than the bare minimum you could offer in a human exchange. When you stopped providing the service, the contract dissolved. End of story. Does it hurt? Like a rotten tooth pulled without anesthesia. But is it necessary? As necessary as breathing. Because every person who leaves frees up space for someone who might actually want you for who you are, not for what you can do. It's like emptying a closet full of clothes that no longer fit you. Sure, it stays empty for a while. But at least now, you have room for things that actually fit you. Then comes the phase where you experiment with boundaries like a child learning to walk. You try saying no. And the first time it comes out with the conviction of someone who orders a spicy dish, but then doesn't eat it. The second time is slightly better. By the 10th, it starts to feel natural. And then one day you realize you said no without adding a 3,000-word explanation. Without feeling obligated to justify your existence. Without sending an apology text 6 hours later. It's at that moment you understand. You're becoming a whole person. Not half a person dedicated to supporting others. Not an appendage to someone else. Not a supporting character in someone else's life story. A complete person. With your own desires, clear boundaries, and the scandalous demand to be treated with the same respect you've always given. You begin to notice things you didn't know before. Like how when you express a genuine opinion, instead of saying what you think others want to hear, some people get angry. Not because your opinion is offensive, but because you dared to have one. You were acting as an emotional mirror, reflecting and validating. You weren't allowed to have your own face. When you start doing things for yourself, signing up for that class, buying that book, taking that weekend off, without consulting the invisible committee of other people's expectations, you feel a strange lightness. It's freedom, but if you've never felt it before, it almost seems dangerous. Like driving without a seatbelt or walking on the edge of a roof. But in reality, it's simply living without the constant burden of having to manage everyone's emotions except your own. The people who stay in your life after this transformation are the ones who deserve to be there from the beginning. They don't applaud your new assertiveness because it's convenient for them, but because they want to see you happy, even when your happiness doesn't directly benefit them. An alien concept. I know, but they really do exist, these functional humans. They're as rare as free parking spaces on a Saturday afternoon, but they do exist. And then comes the moment when you realize that all that sensitivity, that ability to perceive other people's emotions, that damned empathy you thought was a curse, it wasn't the problem. The problem was that you'd used it like others use credit cards, limitlessly, uncontrollably, to the point of total collapse. Now that you've learned to set boundaries, you discover that empathy becomes a beautiful thing. You can connect deeply with people without dissolving into them. You can offer support without completely emptying yourself. You can feel without absorbing everything like a sponge in a universal flood. The version of you that emerges from this process isn't a cold person who has built very high walls. It's a person who has learned the difference between walls and doors. Walls block everything. Doors open and close as needed. You can let in whoever you want, whenever you want, and for as long as you want. And when you need to be alone, you can close that door without feeling like a war criminal. You begin to recognize emotional vampires from miles away. They're always in crisis, always needing something, always a dramatic story. And curiously, their level of urgency is directly proportional to your availability. When you were always available, their every problem was a matter of life and death. Now that you have clear boundaries, suddenly they can handle themselves. Miraculous, right? There's also the wonderful discovery of your authentic tastes. You realize that for years you've eaten at restaurants other people liked, watched movies others wanted to see, listened to music others liked. And now that you start choosing for yourself, you discover that you actually hate that restaurant you always went to. That kind of movie bores you to death, and that music makes you want to throw the stereo out the window. You also realize how many decisions you delegated. Where to live, what job to take, how to spend the weekend, even what to wear. All filtered through the prism of what will others think. Now that that filter has been removed, the world seems more colorful. Or maybe it's always been colorful, but you were looking through gray lenses. Some mornings, you wake up and still feel that phantom weight, like someone who's lost a limb, but still feels it. It's the habit of feeling responsible for the emotional well-being of the entire planet. But then you remember, you're not their unpaid therapist. You're not their parent. You're not their savior. You're simply yourself, and that's more than enough. The new people who enter your life after this transformation see a version of you that others have never seen. They see someone with clear opinions, healthy boundaries, the ability to say yes or no with equal ease. And some of these people ask you a startling question. Have you always been this confident? And you laugh, because the answer is no. You've been insecure for decades. But that insecurity was masked by a boundless availability that seemed like kindness, but was actually fear. Fear of being rejected if you weren't helpful. Fear of being abandoned if you weren't always there. Fear of discovering that, without your role as a savior, you would be nothing. But here's the truth. You became someone precisely when you stopped trying to be everything to everyone. You became whole when you accepted that you didn't have to fill other people's voids. You became strong when you allowed others to carry their burdens instead of placing them on your already bent shoulders. There are times of relapse. Days when the old programming kicks in and you find yourself saying yes when you wanted to say no, offering help when you needed rest, putting someone else before yourself again. But the difference is that now you realize it, and you can correct your course. You can send a message and say, "Sorry, I thought better of it, I can't." A phrase that before would have seemed as impossible as flying, but now you can say it without the world falling apart. You also learn that not every no needs to be accompanied by elaborate explanations. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't require justifications, apologies, or PowerPoint presentations. Some people will still be offended, and that's okay. Their offense is theirs, not yours to handle. Discover the pleasure of doing things alone. Going to the movies without having to coordinate the schedules of 4 other people. Eating what you want without UN-caliber diplomatic negotiations. Spending an entire day without talking to anyone. Not because you're antisocial, but because you need to. Silence becomes refreshing instead of frightening. And then comes the moment when someone asks you for a genuine favor, not a request disguised as an emergency, not emotional manipulation, but an honest request from someone who respects your boundaries and you can say yes, knowing you're doing it because you want to, not because you have to. This is the point where you realize you've won. You haven't eliminated your empathetic nature. You've simply redeemed it, transforming it from a curse into a gift you choose when and how to offer. People who previously took you for granted are starting to notice the change. Some complain. Others adapt. Few admit that maybe, just maybe, they exploited you. And even fewer apologize. But that's not the point. You're not expecting an apology or recognition. You're simply living your life on your own terms. And that's the greatest reward. So here you are, at the end of this journey that is actually just the beginning. You are no longer the version of yourself who always said yes, who emptied himself to fill others, who believed his value depended on his usefulness. You have become someone who knows that true connection doesn't require self-annihilation. You have become someone who understands that protecting your energy isn't selfish, but necessary. You have finally become yourself. And maybe, just maybe, this is exactly who you were meant to be from the beginning. If this video made you feel less alone, leave a like. Every thumbs up tells me you're choosing yourself. Tell me in the comments, I'm finally enough. If you've realized you no longer have to earn your right to exist. Subscribe for more unfiltered, motivational-free psychology content. I'll see you in the next video. Hugs to those who have stopped being the unwanted hero.